the question then you have to ask, so that if that's your licensing strategy you devise, you have to think about, that's your value proposition, that's what you're thinking. And you have to think in terms of how does industry or the partner you want to reach out to view it as an opportunity. You have to think, does this technology fit their pipeline? Does it build out their pipeline? If they've already invested a lot of money and at phase 3 for a similar therapy, unlikely they'd be interested in investing a lot more in your technology or competition for them. So you have to think about, is your value proposition a good opportunity for them? You also want to think about, when you are choosing between licensing partners, does the licensing partner, the commercialization partner, have resources and capabilities required to bring that kind of technology to market? Sometimes it's important to think of the size of the company. If it's truly a platform and you go to a small company, will they be able to leverage the entire capability of the platform? So now let's move to, so how would you move to the next step of tactically getting your partnering started? And this brings us back to, for those of you who did workshop number 1 and 2, that you work closely as an innovator with your technology commercialization office in trying to identify the potential partners and the best approach to reach out to them. And as in the earlier workshops, here is a quick timeline and recap of what happens typically when we file IP and patent applications. You have the provisional patent application. A year later, you do the PCT. 6 months later, it publishes. And at 30 months, you reach national stage. Somewhere in this time is the ideal time to start thinking about reaching out to your commercial partners to market this technology. So like John said, you've articulated your value proposition. We try to write it up as a non-confidential summary that highlights the unmet need, how your technology solves that unmet need, what are the advantages. Then we make a list of potential partners. We've decided our licensing strategy. We make a list of companies that would view this as an opportunity. And typically, we work with you as the investigator because you're in that field to understand if those partners, from your perspective, sound correct, are the ones that you are maybe interfacing with at conferences, etc. You might maybe know specific contacts within that company that would want to champion that science and work in that field. And so this is how you would go about identifying and marketing to potential partners. I want to highlight one thing. So as you are trying to put your technology in, on the path for commercialization, a very common approach is what we call sponsored research agreement or collaboration with industry. So often, as I said, academic technologies are early stage. They're not de-risked, but they have a lot of potential. So sponsored research becomes a good opportunity for both you and the commercialization partner. When they might see the great potential, there might be some intellectual property that as an academic you have filed and is in place. The industry partner would sponsor some research back in the innovator's lab to do some validation research, maybe do more mechanism of action studies, maybe generate more models for the disease. And then typically the industry partner would take an option to license that technology while this research is occurring as it de-risks the technology so that they can license it once there is some more validation work done. The question asked is, what is the mechanism of sponsored research agreements? So sponsored research agreements is just when an industry partner is sponsoring research in the academic lab, right? And often it's a precursor to taking a license. For example, For the example that was here about a mutation in a disease, a company might be interested and might say, but I need to understand a little more. Does it actually work when you make this mutation in the mouse? And they might fund the research because they'd rather find out the answer before they invest a lot of money and say, this is the technology we're going to spend the next 10 years and $1 billion. Okay. So that brings us to the workshop piece, where we have an example for you for a technology that's methods and devices for sustained release of multiple drugs. So what you're going to do is make a commercialization plan, a strategy. And for that, what you're going to do is, like we did in this workshop, go through what's the unmet clinical need, define it, define what the technology solution is doing to address that unmet need. What's the type of technology, what's the stage of development, and what are, collectively with all this, what are you bringing as a value proposition to the potential partners, and what does the partner need from you, what do you need from the partner to get this technology commercialized?